updates in the Ghislaine Maxwell trial as the case enters its third week. The defense is set to lay out its case on Thursday with plans to call up to 35 witnesses, including 3 who have requested to testify anonymously. The lead attorney on the case remains. The charges brought forth against Maxwell were, quote, things Jeffrey Epstein did. But what we've uncovered so far is that there is a massive amount of damning evidence that point directly to her. So how will the defense play their cards in this on Thursday? A court document suggests her legal counsel will make claims that the accusers may have false or distorted memories, dialing in on some of the witnesses' past alcohol, drug abuse, and also mental illness. But will Jeffrey Epstein's alleged co-conspirator testify? We still don't know. Join me now is criminal defense attorney and anchor at Law and Crime Network, Bob Bianchi. Bob, thank you so much for joining me. So, Bob, obviously a lot to unpack here and a lot to follow. I did find it interesting that the defense wants to call in some 35 witnesses. Wouldn't you say that could potentially open up a can of worms?
I think, Stephanie, the defense is trying to get the prosecutors to go down some rabbit holes. You know, when they throw 35 witnesses out there, the prosecution has to now investigate each of those individuals. I have no doubt they're not calling 35 witnesses, but it's actually making the prosecutor do a little bit of extra work. How many witnesses they call, I would imagine it's going to be substantially less than that.
Oh, so this is a tactic, is it's kind of like a distraction so that they can't focus in on the ones that they're actually planning on calling in?
And it's actually working. You have the prosecutors that are kind of like saying to the judge, we want to know which witnesses and in what order are they calling them and which ones are coming on first. And the defense doesn't want to give that information. So, yes, I believe it's a tactic. Now, listen, if you have 35 potential witnesses that you could call as a lawyer, you put all 35 witnesses on that list because you want to make sure that depending on how the case is moving, something may come up on cross-examination where they say, you know what, we didn't want to call that witness, but now we feel compelled that we have to. So you put all those witnesses on that list. But I think there's a little gamesmanship going on here with that.
Yeah, and so far on what we've learned throughout the testimony and the trial, would you say that the evidence is really strong against Maxwell? I mean, there's some overwhelming testimony, if you will, that incriminate Maxwell.
Stephanie, the worst part about this case, and all federal cases for that matter, this case is not unique, is that we don't have cameras in the courtroom. I mean, we are so far back into like caveman times that we can't even have a picture of what's going on in there. We have to have a sketch artist. This goes on in every federal court. So it makes it very difficult for people like me and the public to make an assessment of the most important thing in any trial, especially a trial like this. And that is the credibility of the witnesses. It doesn't make a difference in a case, and I've tried many of them, where there is no supporting evidence whatsoever, but the testimony of the witness themselves. How do they testify? What is their recollection like? How do they survive with regard to previous statements that they gave? Were the statements consistent? Were they inconsistent? A jury learns a lot by the mannerisms and the communication style of an individual to see whether they're believable or not. So we're kind of at a deficit with that. That said, what is compelling here is that many of these witnesses are confirming the similar kind of grooming that has been alleged that Maxwell and Epstein did. And the motive that the defense comes up with is that they are being paid money because they're part of that victims fund, or that they have memory lapses. I don't think any of that is going to resonate with the jury, considering the consistency of the manner in which these young girls were groomed, with Maxwell being part of that whole process.
Yeah, what do you think of the defense's angle where they bring up past drug addiction, alcohol addiction, possible mental illness? Well, do you think that will impact the jury?
I think it's a double-edged sword because, you know what, maybe they've done drugs and alcohol abuse because of the abuse they suffered. That's the argument I'd be making when they were 14, 15, 16-year-old girls that were being trafficked, being given money, being groomed, being made to massage this old man, and then ultimately sexually abused by them. So I think as a defense lawyer, you got to be very careful with that kind of argument. And even so, if a person's using drugs or alcohol, does not mean that they're lying. It does not mean that they are misrecollecting things, because they're all consistently testifying. If it was just one witness, maybe it works, but not when you have 4 people, 2 victims and 2 others that confirm the same modus operandi of the two victims in the case.
Yeah, obviously juries shouldn't be reading news articles and so on, but I've seen an effort from some to basically go soft on Maxwell, and they're almost suggesting because she's a woman that, you know, she shouldn't be treated harshly. And I just think that's so wrong. I think people need to listen to the testimony, the witnesses, and just look at the facts. Just because Maxwell's a woman doesn't mean that she should be let off the hook here.
No, absolutely not. And I, by the way, that's why I love women jurors in a case like this, because there's no woman juror in the world that is going to resonate with, nor a male for that matter. But the fact is, she was involved in orchestrating getting these children to this sexual predator. The argument that people are going to go light on her because she's a woman defendant, I don't think in a case like this makes a whit. People are not going to concern. In fact, they're going to be saying, you know what, a woman of all things should be the person that is a protector of these young girls to make sure that they're not sexually abused. So it's almost in a certain sense worse if you look at it that way, that she's the one that set up these girls to go into the lair of this sexual pedophile.
Yeah, I don't think anyone should be defending her right now. They should be listening and be careful about this, because a lot of young women's lives were impacted by Epstein and those around him. And, you know, we need to see the facts. Really quickly, a lot of people are concerned about the lead prosecutor, Maureen Comey. Obviously, she's the daughter of James Comey, and some people are wondering if there was some sort of conflict of interest here, considering that, you know, James Comey now is kind of part of the political class and tied in with Democrats. Does that matter?
No, not at all. I mean, first of all, most prosecutors, the fact of the matter is, in any prosecutorial agency, the head of the agency or even the FBI is a politically appointed position. When I was the prosecutor, I was appointed by the governor. So there is politics that's involved in all these appointments. That does not mean that if you are the son or the daughter of somebody who is not even connected with that particular office, that in some way, shape, or form that presents any kind of conflict of interest. So yeah, we have to be careful with those kind of things. I mean, this happens all the time. I don't see any potential conflict whatsoever in this case.
Well, Bob, we're going to leave it here. We appreciate your insight, and I couldn't agree with you more. I mean, it's just so annoying that there's no cameras allowed in there. We'd like to see what's going on, and you know, it's so unfair. But anyways, we're going to keep a close eye on it, and we appreciate you. Thank you.
Of course.
Coming up next, the